All right, Mustangs. Here we are with another holiday edition of First Chapter Friday. And this book is a little bit different. This is actually a biography, but it's really cool because all of the stories in this book are stories about Christmases when he was growing up with his family. So the book is called Don't Kill Santa, Christmas Stories by Donald Davis. You can find it in the nonfiction section in the 921s. Donald Davis is a fantastic storyteller. He's one of my favorite professional storytellers, and his collection of Christmas stories is a lot of fun during this holiday season. So here's the first story that he tells of the Christmas when it snowed. When my brother Joe and I were little boys, the first stories that we loved were the stories that our daddy told us about when he was a little boy. Each year during the Christmas season, we would be sure to ask him to tell us about the Christmas when it snowed. Of course, there must have been more than one Christmas when it snowed during our father's childhood in the North Carolina mountains. But when we asked for the story, he always knew exactly what we meant, and the right story followed. Our father was born in 1901 on a family farm far back in the Smoky Mountains. He used to tell us that it was a stretch to call it a farm, since there was almost never enough of anything left over to sell. There were, eventually, 10 surviving children of the 13 born into the household, and simply feeding this household year-round was nearly an all-consuming task. When the younger children started to school, their teacher was their oldest brother, Uncle Grover. He was born in 1885, and before becoming a lawyer, taught 8 of his younger brothers and sisters in a one-room school. In 1910, Daddy was 9 years old and in the 4th grade at the one-room school. It was 2 days before Christmas and the last day before school got out for the holidays. About the middle of the morning, it started snowing. The night before, Daddy had started coughing, and as the snow day wore on, he was coughing more and more at school. Eventually, he started having trouble breathing. And after lunchtime at school, Uncle Grover decided it was time to send Daddy home early. By now, it was really snowing and covering the ground. It was about a 1.5 mile walk from school back to their house. Uncle Grover decided to send Daddy's little sister, our Aunt Mary, to walk home with him. The two of them headed home in the snow. As they walked, it snowed harder and harder, and Daddy had a harder and harder time breathing. He was coughing his head off and felt that he could barely get his breath. Finally, they got onto their own land, but were still about 1/2 mile from home. Aunt Mary wasn't sure that Daddy could make it. She told him to wait while she ran home to get Granddaddy. They were standing by a big log on the side of the road. Daddy and Mary raked the snow back from the leaves piled beside the log. Daddy lay down next to the log, and Mary covered him with leaves to keep him warm until she got back. Then she ran home. As soon as she told their father what had happened, Granddaddy put on his coat and ran with her to find Daddy. By now, the snow had completely covered the leaves with which she had covered him, and when they dug him out, he had fallen asleep in the leaves under the snow. Granddaddy picked Daddy up and ran all the way home with him. When they went in the door of the house, Grandmother was crying. "Oh, Joe," she said, "it's not starting again, is it?" Granddaddy's first wife and 3 of their 5 children had died of whooping cough more than 20 years earlier, and when Grandmother heard Daddy's deep cough, it scared her to death. They put Daddy to bed, wrapping him in quilts heated in the oven of the stove, and Granddaddy quickly saddled his horse to get the nearest doctor, who lived about 3 miles away. When he returned home with Dr. France, who was actually a relative of the family, the doctor went into the room where Daddy was in bed and began to examine him. He leaned over the bed and put his ear directly on Daddy's chest. He had him turn over and put his ear at different places on his back. Then, Daddy told us, he got me to sit up and look out the window. While I was looking out the window, the doctor pointed way out toward the barn and said, "Little Joe, can you see something sitting on top of the barn in the snow?" Daddy told us that while he was straining to try to see through the fallen snow, the doctor slapped him hard on the back. But the slap was just a distraction. It kept him from seeing that just as he was slapped, the doctor had stuck a big, long needle under his ribs and right into one of his lungs. Then the doctor pulled out of his lung what Daddy described to us as a great big slug of bloody water. And as the water came out, he could breathe again. After that ordeal, the doctor told my grandmother that little Joe didn't have the whooping cough. No, he had what they thought sounded like the pneumonia. And the doctor told everyone he was probably not going to die because he was as strong as a little bull. Dr. France told them to keep my daddy warm, feed him a lot of hot soup, and make him turn over every hour or so and feed him real hard on the back. Another day, Daddy was coughing a lot less and looking forward to the coming of Christmas in just 2 more days. It kept slowly snowing throughout the coming day, and by Christmas Eve, the entire world was covered with white. There really was going to be a white Christmas. Before getting ready to go to bed on Christmas Eve, everyone did 2 things. First, each of the little children picked out their best sock and with a little tack hung it along the edge of the mantel over the fireplace in the living room. They weren't sure about it, but they all hoped that maybe they had been good enough for Santa Claus to come by and leave something in the night. The second thing they did before going to bed was to beg their father, my grandfather, to please tie up the dogs. Tie up the dogs, please, please tie up the dogs. Every child entered into the plea. What for? Their father asked with a laughing glint in his eye. The dogs will bark at the reindeer, Uncle Harry explained. The dogs will chase the reindeer, and Santa Claus will decide it's not safe to land. He'll pull up and go on by here and give whatever he has for us to somebody else. Finally, laughing all the while, Granddaddy went outside and tied the dogs up so they wouldn't chase the reindeer away. Now it was safe for everyone to go to bed. Daddy told Joe Brother and me all about what happened next. He said that they were all in bed, still trying to fall asleep, when the dogs started barking like mad, and there came a terrible screaming sound from somewhere beyond the barn. All the children jumped up out of bed and ran into the kitchen, where they knew their mother and father were still up and about. When they got to the kitchen, their mother was helping their father on with his big coat as he then picked up his big shotgun and headed for the door. Don't shoot Santa Claus! Our daddy told us, he himself cried out. I'm not going to shoot Santa Claus. That's not Santa Claus. Something is in with the pigs. Sounds like somebody is stealing one of our pigs on Christmas Eve. Then their mother spoke up. Don't shoot a neighbor, Joe. If a neighbor has gotten so hungry that they are stealing a pig, don't shoot them on Christmas Eve. I won't shoot a neighbor on Christmas Eve, Ella, Granddaddy answered her. If it's a neighbor stealing the pig, I won't shoot them till next week. But I don't think it's a neighbor. With that, he was out the door and into the snow with his gun in one hand and the kerosene lantern in the other. In a few minutes, everyone heard the gunfire. Blam! Blam! Then it went quiet. In no time, Granddaddy came almost running back into the house. Put on your coats and hats, he said to everyone. Even you, little Joe. He pointed to Daddy, who was out of the bed where he was supposed to be sick. You wrap up in a blanket and I will carry you. There's something you've all got to see in case it rains and melts or the snow covers it up again. Come on. Daddy wrapped up in a blanket. Then Granddaddy got him hugged up close under his big coat, which he actually buttoned over the both of them. Granddaddy got Daddy's little head under his own chin, where his full beard came down around Daddy's face and ears, keeping even that part of him warm. And they all started out through the snow and beyond the barn. When they all got to the far side of the barn, they could see that part of the side of the pig pen had been broken, but that it had also been temporarily and quickly fixed back. Then they could see, by the light of the lantern, that all over the snow there was blood and bear tracks. Look, Granddaddy pointed with the lantern. Some old bear didn't eat enough before he went to bed for the winter. Looks like he woke up hungry in the night and decided to have one of our little pigs for his Christmas dinner. At least he knows who has the best pigs in Iron Duff." "Did you shoot him?" Uncle Harry asked. "No," their daddy answered. "I just shot the gun a couple of times to be sure that he was scared on off. I followed him up into the woods a little way to where it looked like he stopped and ate most of the pig. He took the rest with him." Then the whole family made their way back to the house through the snow, and for the second time, they all went to bed in hopes that Santa Claus might actually come. Daddy told us that he went to sleep dreaming of bears in the snow. The dogs didn't bark anymore at all that night, and when everyone was awake the next day, they got up wondering whether Santa had really made a visit in the night. They were almost afraid to go to the fireplace to have a look. When all of the children finally went into the living room, they couldn't believe their eyes. Even from across the room, you could see that there was something in every single stocking hanging over the fireplace. As they jumped and cheered, Granddaddy said, "Why don't you see what you got?" As they took down their stockings and began to feel inside, they made a great discovery. Every single child had gotten from Santa an orange of their very own. And every single child had an entire stick of candy that they could eat without having to share licks with anyone. Some got peppermint and some got horehound. And in the toe of each stocking, every child found a penny for each year old they were on that Christmas day. "Santa Claus is rich!" Uncle Harry cried out. "Santa Claus is rich!" The children all agreed. Santa Claus must be the richest man in the entire world. How could anyone be so wealthy as to be able to give every single child in the world their very own orange, their very own stick of candy, and know what kind of candy each of them would love the best? And who in the whole world could give every one of them a penny for every year they had lived? They simply could not take it all in. Daddy told us that his stick of candy lasted for nearly 3 weeks. Each day he would lick it 3 times. Once to see if it was real, once to really taste it, and once to show that it was actually completely his. Then he would put it away and not lick it again until the next day. As for the orange, he was simply planning to keep it forever and never eat it. He liked to rub the surface and smell the oil on his fingers. Finally, his mother told him that if he didn't eat the orange, it would rot. He slowly spent 3 days eating it a piece at a time, but he saved the peel. It still had its good smell. He kept the peel on the table beside his bed, and every night before going to sleep, he would rub it in his fingers, then sniff them as he fell asleep, dreaming about someday getting to go to a place where oranges actually grew. Later in the day, their mother fixed Christmas dinner for everyone. She fixed 2 chickens so everyone would have a whole piece of their own. While they were eating, Grandmother said to Granddaddy, "Joe, I wish that we had known that the bear was going to get that little pig." "Why, Ella?" he questioned. "Because if we had known that the bear was going to get the pig, we could have taken that pig instead, and we could have had it for our Christmas dinner." "No, Ella," he smiled. "We wouldn't want to have done that. You see, if we had eaten the pig, it would have fed us for one day. But because the bear got the pig, we got a story out of it. And a story will feed us forever." And now, with every year that passes, when the story is told, now more than 90 years later, I am more sure that what Granddaddy said is and always will be true. And that's the first story in Don't Kill Santa, Christmas Stories by Donald Davis. Like I said, he's one of my very favorite storytellers, and you can find this book in the nonfiction section in biographies. So it's under 921 DAV, Don't Kill Santa.